Hello, this is Mr. Beck. Welcome to the tutorial on OpenGL wallpapers. In the first part, you should have downloaded the wallpaper from my my GitHub account. And in your workspace, you should have GL example wall flick ready to go. In this case, I've incorporated some functionality that when the user swipes across the screen, the model moves at a faster rate. In this tutorial, we're going to talk about colors and how to switch the texture on your model so the user can select what color they would like. Here's the wallpaper, and you can see I've got a red heart here. By clicking Settings, you bring up this Settings menu. This is called a list preference here within the application. And it says Choose a Color. When I click on it, all right, I get a list of colors that I can select. And let's take a look at how this is set up, because we're going to look at this in the code. It says download Poker Flip. That's something that I have there. I'm not going to talk too much about that. If you want to see how that works, it's pretty obvious. I've tried to slim down this program as much as possible so it's easy to sort of look at how things are working. But you can select different colors here: red, blue, green, gold, and pink. And by selecting a different color, all right, the color of the model is going to change. All right. What we'll do in part 3 is eventually we'll create different list preferences. This says choose a color. In part 3, we'll go ahead and we'll have one that says choose a default rotation speed or something like that. And they'll be able to click slow, medium, and fast, and the model will rotate at a different speed depending on what the user chooses. Okay, but in this case, we're just going to talk about color. So let's do that. Inside of glexample.java, I have a method called onSharedPreferenceChanged. And this is called every time the user selects a preference or wants a preference changed, right? They go into the settings and they click something. They decide they want the heart to be red. What I'm doing is I'm using sharedPreferences.getString here, and this has 2 arguments. It has cube2_color. That's the key for the list preference. I'm going to show you where that is in a minute. And then the second argument is the default value. When the application first starts, it will set the color of the model to whatever you have set up for number 2. Once the user goes in and clicks something different, each one of those colors has a different number assigned to it. Every time the user clicks a setting, it will take the number that is associated with the color, and it will basically parse it so that it comes and it's loaded here in this string. It's important when working with settings to understand the relationship among 3 different files, and you want to really internalize how these 3 things work together. Okay, we've got this onSharedPreferenceChanged method. We've got 2 XML files. Okay, these 2 XML files are shapes.xml and setting_xml.xml. These 3 things work together. So in setting_xml, you can see we've got a list preference defined. Okay, and we're going to create more of these later. We'll create one for speed. This is the one for color. It has a key. You can see where that was referenced a second ago. It has a title and a summary, and those are found in strings.xml. And then it's got entries and entry values. Okay, entries is what the user sees. Entry values is what is transmitted to the method onSharedPreferenceChanged. So red may equal 2 or blue may equal 4. All right, but we have these 2 things. I'm going to show you where those are right now. Inside of shapes.xml, here's our 2 lists. Okay, the first one is called cube2shapeColor. This is what the user sees: red, blue, green, gold. And the list preference also defines cube2_shapeColor file, right? And these are the values that match. So for every item on this list here, there is a corresponding value in this list. Okay, so it looks to me like green is, for example, 3. All right, so understanding how the list preference, right, references this set of lists here, right, which are then, set up inside of this method. Looking at how those three things work together and understanding that is key to this set of lessons. All right? Well, anyway, so when the user clicks a new one, a new color, and it brings the color 3 in here, here's what I'm doing. I have an integer now called colorInt, and I'm parsing that string because it's a string and I want an integer. All right, so I'm creating an integer now from that string. And in my GetterSetter class, I have two values, color and load text. I'm setting the color in the GetterSetter class to the value of colorInt, which I will use later. And I'm setting a value called load text to 1 there. Loading textures is an expensive operation. You can't do it every time the screen refreshes because it takes a second. It processes the PNG file, it applies it to the model. That takes a second. And if you try to apply a texture every time the screen refreshes, the application is very unresponsive. It doesn't run well. So you only want to apply textures to a model when you absolutely have to. And when the user selects a new color, that's a good time to take a second and apply a new texture. So I'm setting a value called load text to 1 to make sure that the textures are only applied once in a while. Let me show you how I do that right now. OpenGL renderer is where all the work is done. Okay, and we have onDrawFrame here, which is a refresh method, much like in Space Blaster. This is happening 60 times a second, who knows? And one of the first things I do is I check the GetterSetter class for load text. If it equals 1, I call model.initText, which applies our new texture. I'm going to show you that in a second. And then it sets load text back to 0. So if the user has made a selection, right, it applies a texture, and then load text is back to 0, so this will not be called again unless the user selects a new color. All right. Model.initText, you can trace this and you can follow how it works and where it's happening. Eventually ends up inside of fileTexture.java. And eventually I am calling the method, it calls the method loadTexture. Now this argument int card here is a holdover from another program. We're not actually using that here. But eventually when you call model.initText, loadTexture gets called. And we are creating an input stream, and depending on the value of color inside of our GetterSetter class, if the user has loaded the number 3, it will go in and it will create an input stream from the green text file in our drawable folder, right? Really depends on what number has been selected here. And here's our drawable folder, and you can see that I've got all my textures there ready to go. So it creates an input stream, it loads the file, and then it calls another method down here, create texture, okay? And that applies the texture to the model. And once again, you can see, you can sort of trace the program flow fairly easily here. From OpenGL renderer, you can trace from here to here without much effort. It's pretty easy to see how we get from point A to point B if you look at it. All right, so the goal for the class is this. What I need to see you do is this. I'm going to have you go into the shapes.xml file and make these here match what your color set is. If you've got a gold blue color for your model, make it say gold blue. If you only have 3, delete 3 that don't make sense, and then delete 3 here so that these two lists match. And when the user goes into settings and selects a new color should be applied to your model. It's actually pretty easy to go in and modify what I have here, I think. So when you have your settings working so that your model is changing color based on the user selection, let me know. It's time to move on to part 3, where we will create a new list preference that deals with speed. All right, thank you for watching, and good luck.